All right,
Well,
we
we
got
had
one
one
more here,
shared
fellas.
experience, yeah, already, and now a second, right?
One more, yep. So this is Elliott Smith. We are covering for the second time with either or. Josh doesn't know this because I didn't. I guess I didn't tell him what I was covering, but we're going to be listening to. But in the opening montage, you heard "Ballad of Big Nothing," and now you're going to hear "Angelus."
Someone's always coming around here, trailing some new kill.
All right, Matt, run the numbers. Okay, Either Or by Elliott Smith comes in at number 28 in the 1990s on Best Ever Albums, number 3 in 1997, number 133 of all time. It is Elliott Smith's highest rated album on Best Ever Albums. 0 for 4 in Rolling Stone tonight. I didn't see any of these records in Rolling Stone's list. And Elliott Smith ranked number 97 of overall artist rankings on Best Ever Albums. So as I said, this is the second time we're covering Elliott Smith. We previously covered his self-titled album from 1995 in season 4, episode 42. That was his second record. His debut album is called Roman Candle. And Either Or was released on February 25th, 1997. And this album was recorded, if you guys remember from the bio from before, Elliott Smith did have a band that he was in for the first couple records. That band was called Heat Miser. And while he was recording this record, his third record, again, the band Heat Miser was still around. But by the time the album was released, Heat Miser has finally disbanded. So it's kind of interesting that he's had this solo project going on for several records before his band actually breaks up.
Then he became Cold Miser.
And he became Cold Miser, Frozen Miser. So Either Or, it found, so this album's kind of interesting. Elliott Smith is venturing into more of a full instrumentation. So if there's certainly a difference between this record and his first two, where those were more just him and a guitar. This is kind of exploring different instrumentation with guitar, bass, drums, some synths and keys, and all those instruments played by Elliott Smith himself. So he's kind of a one-man band in this record. And so this album's kind of, it's been described as kind of a bridge between, the first couple records, which, the lo-fi acoustic, sound of his first couple records. And then the albums that come after this, like XO and Figure Eight, kind of have a little bit, they're more produced, more cleaner sounds. And this is kind of, merging, the lines between those. So that's what you're getting here. We have another interesting this gets its title with more philosophy. It's a very philosophy heavy night here, but it gets its title Either Or from a book by Danish philosopher Soren Kierkegaard. Josh, did you read the Kierkegaard Either Or book? I think it's his first one.
No, I did not.
I've read Kierkegaard.
Okay. Well, I guess Josh isn't so smart this time around, so there you go. Yeah. I haven't read either of them, so I'm the dumbest one of all of us, I guess. But so I guess this refers to the contrast between the aesthetic subjective experience and the ethical objective being. So we'll talk more about that in our next lesson next week. We'll go more academic on you, but coming from Kierkegaard, that's where Elliott Smith gets his title. And it also references several places in Portland, Oregon, where Elliott Smith is from. It is his best-selling record, selling over 430,000 copies in the United States. And what this album kind of is known for in many circles is that it was heard by a director, Gus Van Sant, who was impressed with this record and decided to incorporate a number of songs in the film Good Will Hunting. So you might have recognized some of these songs from that movie. Some of the songs included from this record in that film include Between the Bars, Say Yes, and Angelus. Elliott Smith also recorded a new song for the film called Miss Misery, which was nominated for an Oscar, and it did put Elliott Smith in the limelight for a short period of time because he performed this at the Oscars, which was kind of something that he was not expecting.
Right.
He's certainly not the person that seeks out the attention like that, but he did agree to perform the song only after the producers informed him that if he wasn't going to do it, they would choose someone else to play it. So I guess he didn't want to get, Phil Collins and have someone else do, like, remember the Against All Odds when I forgot who did that, but it was terrible. So Elliott Smith goes on the Oscars and performs this song, Miss Misery, which is actually not on this record, but it was around the same time. And he said about that, quote, "The Oscars was a very strange show where the set was only one song cut down to less than 2 minutes, and the audience was a lot of people who didn't come to hear me play. I wouldn't want to live in that world, but it was fun. It was fun to walk around on the moon for a day." So some positive things from that.
I never knew the story about "Against All Odds," a song I love, not being sung by Phil Collins. Matt,
we talked about this, didn't we?
If we did, I don't remember a lip synced vocal performance with an interpretive dancer.
Yeah,
wow.
And
Phil Collins sitting in the stands.
Yes,
That's weird.
All right, sorry, I don't want to take over from Elliott Smith right here, but I'm like, wow, okay.
He wanted to do it, but they wouldn't let him. It's that's what makes it even
Wow.
funnier. So yeah, and it's not a good version. So Elliott Smith singing "Miss Misery" way better than
Yes.
the interpretive dance "Against All Odds." I thought we talked about that, but I don't know. Our memories are all not so
but
great.
wild story.
Yeah. And so also by this time, Elliott Smith was kind of drinking heavily, and also was taking a number of antidepressants. At the end of the tour for this record, some of his close friends staged an intervention in Chicago. It did prove ineffective, and he continued to have issues with substance abuse, which I'm sure we'll talk about again. We're going to cover more Elliott Smith. Also, fun fact, talking about Good Will Hunting, full circle here, boys. The Dandy Warhols, "Boys Better," that song is on the Good Will Hunting soundtrack as well. Also, that song from the same record that Not If You Were the Last Junkie on Earth, Dandy Warhols Comes Down, is from that record. So there you go, Josh. You got more Dandy Warhols stuff there. I'm sure you've seen Good Will Hunting. Maybe you can put that on Letterboxd.
Yes,
so.
I own that movie, yes.
There you go. It's pretty good. Check it out. Josh, what'd you think of this record?
So, I like this album. I don't know. I didn't love this album, and I kind of got a little frustrated with his sound. I feel like this album is very kind of one note in a way. I know you said that there was added instrumentation, but I really didn't get that vibe on this. It really did sound mostly like him and a guitar. He's kind of got this slightly depressed feeling to his songs. This whole album. yeah. It's kind of got it's a lo-fi DIY sound too, I feel like, on him. I mean, if he did all of the instruments, that adds to it. And I just keep coming back to like Nick Drake. I think John said his name earlier this week, but like that is like the strongest corollary I have with this song, and I think I like Nick Drake more. There's definitely some stronger songs on here that I really liked. I liked Alameda a lot. I liked Angelus a lot. I liked Behind the Bars a lot. He does have a knack for like kind of this melancholy like pop sensibility that I do respond to, but there's just something about either the way this album is constructed or just the fact that it's really just him and a guitar at the end of the day that I struggled with this week on this album. Maybe it's just in contrast to all the stuff going on in Spiritualized and Yola Tango that the contrast had stood out more, but I think I liked the other Elliott Smith album that we talked about previously a lot, and I feel like I'm just not as high on this one as I was on the first one. He does have a strong songwriting capability in terms of his lyrics. There's definitely like heartbreak on here and kind of some vivid imagery, but there was just something that was not enough for me on this album, and I'm wondering how you guys feel about it. So it's a thumbs in the middle for me this week. There was just, I did listen to that Miss Misery song when I heard about, I kind of looked at the Good Will Hunting piece of it in Wikipedia, and so then I went and checked out that song, and I was also felt like I had heard, I think ultimately I looked it up because I felt like I had heard some of these songs before, but I couldn't place where, kind of the same way you felt, Matt, about the other album. So I think it must have been from Good Will Hunting. I can't think of, I didn't look to see where it's been played at all references, but like Between the Bars or or Angelus just sounded really familiar, and those are both on the Good Will Hunting
Yeah,
soundtrack.
Between the Bars, I think, is the
Yeah.
more popular. It's the one that got the most Spotify plays. You didn't remember Miss Misery? I know it's
No.
not on this record, but
No, I didn't.
okay.
Yeah. I don't, when I think of Good Will Hunting, I don't think of the soundtrack or the score really. So that's always kind of, well, that's an aside. But anyway, what did John, what did you think of either or?
Well, for whatever reason, Josh, you and I just are in different cosmos this week
Yeah.
because I like this album quite a bit. I remember the first time, I will agree with this though. I know Elliott Smith for some people is connected to Good Will Hunting, and I don't ever place him with that
Yeah.
that movie either, because like you, Josh, I don't think of the soundtrack on that. If I were to focus on it, I could know that. Elliott Smith is one of these acts that honestly I was interested to cover on the show because for whatever reason I just really never got around to listening to his stuff. I knew he was critically well regarded. I wasn't avoiding him for any active reasons. It just hadn't ever happened. And we're going to be covering at least 4 of his albums, I think. And this is number 2 on the podcast. I remember in the first Elliott Smith album we covered, I said that it was a slight thumbs up for me, but I saw parts of that album where I'm like, I think I'm going to really dig like his stuff getting down the road. And I think with the evolution here, it's subtle. You're not wrong, Josh, in that it doesn't, when you hear like, more instrumentation, you kind of chuckle a little bit because it's still a very spare album.
Right.
And it still is a little bit one foot in the lo-fi. With that being said, I do notice the increase in some of the instrumentation, and also the fact that the production isn't so lo-fi that it's distracting in the way that at times it was on the first one. I think really what stood out to me on this one, and the funny thing is the 2 songs Between the Bars and Say Yes that have the most listens on this, I think were my 2 least favorite songs on the album, interestingly enough. I like them, but I was like, wow, I'm surprised those are there. And then I realized they were in like Good Will Hunting. I'm like, okay, so it could be reference point as opposed to like true Spotify grab, right? Yeah. But there's songs like Alameda and Rose Parade jump off right off the bat. 2:45 a.m. The quality of songs on this album, the build to them, and the choices of notes that he plays. While there's not a lot there and they're spare, I was really connecting with how even though he wasn't doing much, it felt more substantive to me on this album. And the lyrics are very good on this album as well. It definitely is existential. It's funny you brought up Kierkegaard, Matt, because as I was reading this, I'm like, these songs are like both about universal things and nothing at the same time. They're oblique, right? And to know that he was influenced by the first ever existential philosopher it makes sense now thematically in terms of what's going on this album. I think at the end of the day, though, what really stood out about this is as a song collection, I really connected with the songs, both lyrically, thematically, and in terms of the music choices he was making. The chord progressions are straight ahead, and once you figured out what he's doing, you get an idea of where he's going to go. He throws just small little twists in from time to time to vary the verse. And I did notice on this one, just like I did on the first one, that sometimes it's linear, and sometimes it's linear with hiccups built in a little bit. So like one note is played off of where you think it would be going, and sometimes he's going sort of like on off rhythms. And I like the fact that he varies from those 3 different styles of chord selection, and I thought that was a real strength of this album. I am going to be very interested to hear what he sounds like more produced. I don't want to weigh in one way or the other of how I think it will go. I can definitely though see what I think it would sound like when he's more well produced, and if it goes one way, I think I'm going to really, really like it because it's going to fall into a lane of music I greatly appreciate. If it goes another direction, which I think it's less likely to go, I could see myself saying, "Ooh, it's a little bit too like commercial grab the brass ringy a little bit. And so I'm going to purposely stay away from it until we get there. But this album was the sweet spot for me. I enjoyed it. It's one of my favorite like sort of folk or acoustic singer-songwriter albums we've done on the time that we've done the podcast. So comfortable thumbs up for me. I like this one.
Before Matt gives his take, did you feel like you responded emotionally to this album at all?
I don't know if I would have said I responded emotionally to it, because I don't think it was there wasn't enough like thematically, right? And it wasn't, I don't think it was like really speaking to me either musically or lyrically in a way that was designed to be emotional connective to, because like I'm stumbling a little bit. I think there's always like a despair with Elliott Smith, and
Right.
I guess luckily for me, while I experience many of the emotions, I rarely am in like a despair state, if that makes sense. So when that's kind of why like the Nick Drake albums, there were a lot of songs I liked on those albums too, but if you'd ask me, do I connect with Nick, in fact I think I even said this when we covered them, I don't necessarily connect with them emotionally, even though I know if you're in the despair state, it's like I could absolutely see how you connect like viscerally to them.
Yeah.
Does that do a good job of explaining it a little bit?
Yeah, I asked too because I feel like that feeling really permeated for me on this listen, like to a point where it was like I was like, okay, I've had enough type of that feeling, and like also like
The despair part?
yeah, the just kind of
Yeah,
the sadness through the album. I really picked up on that, and then I think too, like the way he sings or the production, it feels like he's singing right to you, like right in front of you. And so
Yeah, just like how Nick Drake, I always
so
felt the same way about
it
him.
just
Yeah.
felt intense in some way too. I think this week listening to this album.
Well, and I guess that
in.
comes back, and,
Yeah.
and I'm not going to ask you to answer this, but like I guess it comes back to like how you feel about being like in the despair space, right? Like it's
Right.
luckily for me, it's not. It kind of goes back to what we talked about with like pornography, right? From The Cure, where Matt was like, "This is harsh because I don't live in this space very often, and like I don't like this space either, right? So as a result, it's not an inviting sound for me. And I'm like, oh, I kind of am familiar with this type of space.
Yeah,
You know what I mean? And I don't want to go there all the time, but like I resonate. Like this type of sort of despair or like longing, right, is not a space that I'm in very often, but it's because of that, I don't think it scares me or it chases me off. So I ironically, I think it was like a neutral feeling emotionally, and it was more a musical album for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What about you, Matt?
So I think I'm the one that knows that's most familiar with Elliott. I've known these albums. I know what's coming down the road. So I will be interested to hear the takes there, because it does pick up more. And I will say that I get why you say, Josh, this doesn't sound like a full band. I guess it's I wouldn't say it's full band, but more instrumentation.
Yeah.
It's certainly not throughout it, but it's definitely on songs like Ballad of Big Nothing, Pictures of Me. Cupid's Trick, probably more so than anything, is like he's got like an electric guitar in there, and like heavier drums. It's kind of like, so it's and that's why I think it talks about in the description of this record of being a bridge between his earlier stuff and his later stuff, because he does go back and listen to Cupid's Trick, and that's more of a taste of what you're going to get of the sound on like Figure Eight, for example.
Well, I really like that
Basement on
song.
the
That's
Hill. So
a good sign.
yeah, he's gonna go more in that direction from what I recall. I haven't listened to those records in a long time, but they're definitely he picks it up more in later records. So this of the early Elliott Smith records, this is my favorite. I think. And actually I do this does remind me of Good Will Hunting, because I remember there's a couple of, I've seen that movie a bunch of times, not in a while, but when I in my heyday of watching that film, probably back late 90s, early 2000s, there's definitely a couple of scenes in here where it's really well placed of like a song like Angelus is a really well placed song, Ballad Between the Bars, another well placed song. So it kind of evokes this kind of this emotion that's kind of just like very kind of solemn, quiet. It's a very reserved record, and sonically, he's kind of for the most part is really not. I think there's a lot of emotion within it, but he's also like keeping it really tight to the vest. He's not really, he's really playing delicate guitar parts. There's an intentionality of just kind of keeping this reserved sound and not really going all out for the most part. There's, like I said, there's a couple of parts where he'll probably get a little more fortissimo, if you will, to the music. But I've always liked this album. And the times that I've listened to this album the most have been like kind of late at night when I'm just kind of like by myself, just wanted to I want something just to kind of chill out to. And this is an album that I would go to because I think it's a great, it's a great vibe for that. There's definitely a Nick Drake vibe in what he does, particularly at this stage of his career. And I was very lukewarm on Nick Drake. I really struggled kind of, connecting with his stuff. And so there is definitely a sadness that's similar, but what's different is just musically, right? Like this, I don't know, part of the maybe it was the voice of Nick Drake. Maybe it was like kind of like the cello that would come in here and there. It just seemed like it was a heavier Nick Drake to me was a heavier, like more of a painful sound, where this is a lighter sound to me. And I think that's for me is a big distinction. But a song like Angelus is just, the first time I heard that, I was like, oh damn, that song just connects with me. There is, like, Johnny, I guess you talked about like a longing or like a nostalgia or like kind of like that thing. That's something that I can connect with here and there. And I think it's such an interesting part because it's mostly just guitar finger picking, but then there's this pinging sound that goes throughout the song as well. And it's such a simple thing, but to me, it adds such resonance. It adds such emotion to it. And it takes it to a different level and just takes a really pretty melody. And just, I don't know, it's something weird. I noticed that this week going, man, that just little high pitched note that's just sitting there is doing so much for me in this song. Right. Yeah. And I find it fascinating when you're able to do something so simple and make it so poignant, at least for me. So, so I really like this record. I like going back to it. It's not something that I think that it doesn't surprise me, Josh, that it's a little like, I don't know, off-putting or you have a hard time connecting with it. Yeah, it's definitely heavy. And Elliott Smith, it wasn't something that I listened to the first time. It was like, oh crap, I love this. It's kind of like, man, it was samey. I'm like, I don't know if I'm ready for this. It's like his voice is kind of like, it's got like a little whiny kind of like it's not terribly crisp, and there's a number of things about this that I think could be off-putting to a new listener, especially one that might not be totally into singer-songwriter melancholy type stuff. But this one was an easier album for me to get into than his first couple albums. And so I like the bridge between the early and later Elliott Smith stuff. I do like, and I think it kind of comes out here. So so I'm a fan of this. It's not something I'm going to listen to at any time during the day. I still think it's a good, it was a great album to listen to today. It was just rainy and cold, like driving to work. So
I agree, Matt, because I revisited part of it today, and it was like, it's a great,
and I felt similar. There was a day last week that was still kind of crappy too, and that's when I'm like, let me listen to the Bob Dylan Time Out of Mind record, and they're both kind of set for that kind of vibe. But this album, to me, I get so much more out of this than I do that record to do a callback there. So not just a nighttime vibe, but just kind of if you're feeling a little down yourself, you're just like, man, this day's crappy. I'm a little under the weather. Let me put on some, let me put on Either Or, and it just you can roll with that in that atmosphere, I think.
We're talking vibe a lot, though. I do want to go back to, once again, though, he makes interesting choices in terms of the notes he plays. I think that's what really stands out to me, because sometimes acoustic music can lose me because it's what it is before it ends, and then it's next verse same as the first, right? And like that, I never, on either of these albums with Elliott Smith, I've never felt that way. And with the flourishes of the band in there a little bit, it's almost like building a pyramid a little bit more with some other stuff added to it. It's like, interesting to have him, like you said, Matt, with electric guitar or multi-layers in it. So I'm curious for the next couple albums. It's a good spot to be.